He gave his last $5 to a rich CEO who couldn't pay for gas, not knowing this single act of kindness would uncover a truth that would change 3 generations forever. Detroit, winter, brutal, snow piled in dirty heaps against broken buildings, wind slicing through the projects like a knife. Marcus Johnson, 12, trudged through knee-deep slush, his second-hand jacket doing nothing against the cold. Holes in his sneakers let in ice water with every step. His face was tight with worry. No money meant no dinner. No dinner meant another night listening to his little sister cry herself to sleep. The weight of adult problems sat heavy on child's shoulders. The corner store, Miller's, looked the same as always. Flickering neon, bars on windows, shelves half empty. Marcus pushed open the door, bell jangling weakly. "You're late," Miller grunted from behind bulletproof glass. "Sorry, had to help Grandma with her breathing machine." Marcus grabbed the dirty mop from the corner. 4 hours of work, $20, just enough for some bread, milk, and maybe, if he was lucky, Grandma's heart pills. The door swung open, cold air rushed in. A man entered, tall, expensive coat, leather shoes worth more than everything Marcus owned combined. William Parker, 50, CEO of Parker Industries. His face showed irritation, like the store itself offended him. "I need to pay for pump 3, Parker said, not looking at Miller. $42. Parker reached for his wallet, not there. Checked other pockets, nothing. His jaw tightened. "Seems I've left my wallet. My driver will be back shortly." Miller laughed, harsh. "No money, no gas. Next." Red crept up Parker's neck. Embarrassment, anger. He wasn't used to being refused. "Listen, my car is right outside. I can—" "Don't care if your car's on the moon. No money, no gas. You holding up my line." There was no line, just Marcus watching quietly from the corner, mop in hand. Something about the man's face, the flash of shame quickly masked by pride, struck Marcus. Without thinking, he dug into his pocket, pulled out his wrinkled $5 bill, then reached for the hidden pocket inside his shoe. The emergency money, $15 saved over months, $1 at a time. He laid it all on the counter. "I got it." Both men turned, surprise on both faces. Miller scowled. "Kid, that's your money." "It's okay," Marcus said, not meeting either man's eyes. Parker stared at the boy. "You don't need to do that." Marcus shrugged. "My grandma says when you can help, you help. Doesn't matter if you're struggling too." Something flickered in Parker's eyes. Recognition, memory. He took a business card from his pocket, wrote something on the back. "What's your name?" "Marcus Johnson." Parker handed him the card. "I pay my debts, Marcus Johnson." Marcus took it, nodded, went back to mopping as Parker left. 3 hours later, 5 flights of stairs, elevator broken again. Marcus pushed open the door to apartment 512. The smell hit him first, mildew, medicine, poverty trying its best to be clean. "That you, Marcus?" The voice from the bedroom was weak, tired. "Yeah, Grandma, it's me." Ruby Johnson, 68, sat propped against pillows, oxygen tube in her nose. Once strong hands now gnarled with arthritis. Eyes still bright, though, still fighting. 6-year-old Zoe scrambled off the bed, rushing to him. "Did you bring food? I'm hungry." Marcus swallowed hard. "Not today, Z. Tomorrow." Her face fell, but she nodded, used to disappointment. "How's the breathing today?" he asked Ruby, checking the oxygen tank levels. "Running low?" Ruby waved him off. "Don't you worry about me. Did you eat?" "Yeah." The lie came easy now. "Miller gave me a sandwich." Ruby's eyes narrowed. She knew better. "Where's your money?" Marcus hesitated. "Someone needed help." Ruby sighed but didn't scold him. She'd taught him that kindness. "We'll make the canned beans last another night." A knock on the door, loud, authoritative. Marcus froze. Rent wasn't due for 3 days. Police, social services. "Stay with Grandma," he told Zoe, moving cautiously to the door. Through the peephole, William Parker, standing in the dingy hallway like a penguin in a desert. Marcus opened the door slightly, chain still on. "How'd you find me?" "Your manager was quite helpful with an extra 50. Parker's eyes were different now, searching. "May I come in?" Marcus glanced back at his grandmother, then at the past due notices stacked on the counter, hesitated, then unlatched the chain. Parker stepped inside, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the patched furniture, the medical equipment. His expression changed, not pity, something deeper. "You live here with your grandmother?" Parker asked. "And my sister, our parents—" Marcus stopped. No need to explain. Parker nodded slowly, then looked past Marcus to Ruby. Their eyes met. Something electric passed between them. Ruby's mug slipped from her hand, crashed to the floor. "William?" she whispered, voice suddenly stronger. Parker's face drained of color. "Ruby? Ruby Watson?" Marcus looked between them, confused. "Grandma, you know him?" Ruby's hand trembled as she pointed at Parker. "That man, he's the boy I saved 30 years ago. The one I told you about." Parker took a step forward, disbelief etched on his face. "The woman who fed me when I was homeless, who got me into that youth program." His voice broke. "That was you?" Ruby nodded, tears filling her eyes. "You were just a skinny boy then, sleeping behind that old theater." Parker moved closer, kneeling beside her bed. "You changed my life. Everything I have. Everything I became. It started with you." Zoe tugged at Marcus's sleeve. "What's happening?" Marcus shook his head, stunned. I think we just found family we didn't know we had." Parker looked from Ruby to Marcus, then to Zoe. His face showed recognition, then determination. "All these years," he said softly, "I've been looking for you, to repay what you gave me." He took Ruby's hand. "And now your grandson has reminded me of the most important lesson you taught me." "What's that?" Marcus asked. Parker turned to him, eyes bright with purpose. "That sometimes life comes full circle, and today I finally get to keep a promise I made 30 years ago." The apartment fell silent. Marcus stood frozen, watching his grandmother and this stranger, this rich man who somehow knew her, staring at each other like ghosts from the past. "I don't understand," Marcus said finally. "Grandma, you never said you knew anyone rich." Ruby's eyes never left Parker's face. "I didn't know he became rich. Last I saw him, he was just a skinny boy with nowhere to go." Her voice cracked. "Just like my Thomas." At the mention of that name, Parker's eyebrows rose. "Thomas? Your son?" Ruby nodded, pain etching deeper lines in her face. "My boy. Got mixed up in drugs years ago. Left one day, never came back." Marcus stiffened. They didn't talk about his father. Not ever. Parker glanced at Marcus, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Thomas is your father?" "Was," Marcus said flatly. "He's dead now. Overdose 3 years ago." The weight of those words hung heavy in the room. Zoe pressed closer to Marcus, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Ruby wiped a tear with a trembling hand. After Thomas left, their mother tried to keep it together. Car accident took her 2 years later. Been just us three ever since. Parker sat down heavily on the worn couch, running his hand over his face. "Life has a cruel sense of humor, doesn't it? All these years I've been searching for the woman who saved me while you've been struggling just to survive." He looked around the apartment again, taking in the water stains on the ceiling, the duct-taped window, the medicine bottles lined up like soldiers on the nightstand. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly. Marcus opened his mouth to say they were fine, the lie he told everyone, but Ruby cut him off. Bad, she admitted. Eviction notice came yesterday, medical bills piling up. Marcus works himself to the bone, but… She shook her head. We're drowning. Parker stood up suddenly, decision clear in his eyes. Not anymore. He pulled out his phone. Pack your things, all of you. Marcus stepped between Parker and his grandmother. What are you talking about? I'm getting you out of here, tonight. We're not going anywhere with you, Marcus said, voice hard. We don't even know you. Parker met his gaze evenly. You're right, you don't. But I owe your grandmother my life, and I intend to repay that debt. Ruby reached for Marcus's hand. It's okay. William was always a good boy, even back then. Had a fire in him, just like you. Marcus hesitated, trust warring with survival instinct. Where would we go? My house, just until we figure things out. Parker's voice softened. I have more rooms than I know what to do with. 2 hours later, they pulled up to an iron gate. Beyond it, a house that looked like something from a movie. 3 stories sprawling across manicured grounds, lights glowing from within like a beacon. Marcus pressed his face against the car window, Zoe mirroring him on the other side. Even Ruby seemed stunned into silence. This is where you live? Zoe whispered. By yourself? Parker nodded, something like embarrassment crossing his face. It gets lonely. The inside was even more impressive. Marble floors, sweeping staircase, ceilings that seemed to reach the sky. Eleanor! Parker called, and a woman in her 60s appeared, eyebrows rising at the sight of his guess. This is Ruby, Marcus, and Zoe, Parker explained. They'll be staying with us for a while. Please prepare the east wing. Eleanor nodded, not questioning, and disappeared to carry out the task. Are you a king? Zoe asked, wide-eyed. Parker laughed, the sound echoing in the cavernous entryway. No, just a man who got lucky in business. And in mentors, Ruby added quietly. Parker nodded, his expression serious again. That's right. Without you, Ruby, none of this would exist. He led them to a dining room where food awaited. More food than Marcus had seen in months. His stomach growled audibly, but he hesitated, pride still burning. Parker gestured to the chairs. Please, eat. Zoe didn't need a second invitation. She climbed into a chair, plate already in hand. Ruby moved slower, oxygen tank rattling beside her. You need a doctor, Parker said, watching her labored breathing. Can't afford one, she replied automatically. You can now. He turned to Marcus, who still hadn't moved. It's not charity. It's repayment. Marcus finally sat, hunger winning over pride. What did she do? Exactly. To make you feel like you owe her this much? Parker served himself a small portion, then looked at Ruby. May I tell him? She nodded, focusing on helping Zoe cut her chicken. 30 years ago, I was homeless, Parker began. My father was an alcoholic, my mother long gone. I ran away at 14 thinking anything would be better than another beating. He pushed food around his plate. I was wrong. The streets were worse, cold, hungry, scared. Marcus listened, silent recognition in his eyes. One day, I was sitting outside a diner, watching people eat. Your grandmother walked by. She had a young boy with her. Must have been your father. Parker's voice softened. She saw me, really saw me when everyone else looked through me like I was invisible. Ruby smiled faintly. You were so skinny, reminded me of a stray cat. She bought me a meal, Parker continued, but she didn't stop there. She found me a place at a youth shelter, made sure I got into their education program. When she found out I had a knack for computers, she convinced the shelter director to get me a used one. He looked at Ruby, emotion raw on his face. She visited every week, brought cookies, asked about my progress. When no one else in the world cared if I lived or died, your grandmother treated me like I mattered. The room fell quiet, only the sound of silverware against plates breaking the silence. "What happened?" Marcus finally asked. "Why did you lose touch?" Parker's face darkened. "The shelter closed. Funding cuts. I got moved to another city. By the time I made it back to Detroit years later, your grandmother had moved. I've been searching for her ever since." "And now here we are," Ruby said softly. "Full circle." Parker nodded, then turned to Marcus. "Your act of kindness today, it was like seeing her again all those years ago. Same spirit, same heart." Marcus shifted uncomfortably under the praise. "It was just $5. "It was everything you had," Parker corrected. "Just like what she gave me was everything I needed." Later that night, after showing them to their rooms, bigger than their entire apartment, Parker found Marcus standing at a window, looking out over the moonlit grounds. "Can't sleep?" Parker asked. Marcus shook his head. "It's too quiet, too soft." Parker understood. Comfort felt wrong when you weren't used to it. "Your sister seems to have adapted quickly," he noted with a smile. Marcus nodded. "Zoe's still young enough. She'll forget the bad stuff eventually. And you?" "I don't want to forget." Marcus turned to face him. "If this is real, if you're really going to help us, I need to know why." Parker considered this. "Have you ever heard of karmic debt?" "No. It's the idea that the universe keeps track, good and bad. What you put out comes back." Parker leaned against the window frame. "Your grandmother saved me when I had nothing, made me believe I could be something. Everything I built came from that belief." He gestured toward the sleeping wing where Ruby rested. "And look at her now, sick, struggling, while I live in luxury." His voice hardened. "That's not how the story is supposed to end." Marcus studied Parker's face, searching for lies, for hidden motives, found none. "So what happens now?" he asked. Parker straightened. "Tomorrow, your grandmother sees the best doctors in the city. We get her proper treatment. You and your sister enroll in good schools, and I start making things right." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Marcus turned back to the window, doubt still lingering. "Sounds too good to be true." "It does," Parker agreed. "But sometimes life surprises us. Sometimes the world isn't as cold as we think it is." But as Marcus would soon discover, the world had one more surprise waiting, one that would test everything they thought they knew about family, forgiveness, and the true cost of second chances. Morning brought sunlight streaming through real curtains. Marcus woke disoriented, the softness of the bed foreign. For a moment, he thought he'd dreamed it all. Down the hall, doctors examined Ruby. Real doctors, specialists, their faces serious as they listened to her lungs, checked her heart. "She needs surgery," they told Parker privately. "Soon," Parker nodded. "Whatever it costs." 3 days passed. Ruby grew stronger with proper medication. Zoe bloomed, following Eleanor around the mansion, asking endless questions. Marcus remained cautious, waiting for the catch. On the 4th day, Parker found him in the library. "There's something you should see." He handed Marcus a folder. Inside, an investigation report. "You've been looking for your father," Parker stated. Marcus's head snapped up. "He's dead." "Is he?" Parker pointed to the folder. "Last page." A photograph, recent. A man in a rehabilitation center, thin, older, but unmistakable. "Dad," Marcus whispered. "Thomas Johnson, clean 18 months, working as a counselor at the center." Parker watched him carefully. "He's been looking for you, too." Marcus's hands trembled. "Does Grandma know?" "Not yet. I thought you should decide." Rage and hope warred in Marcus's chest. "He abandoned us." "Yes," Parker agreed. "Just like your grandmother never abandoned me." The words hung between them. That afternoon, a car arrived. Thomas Johnson stepped out, terrified, sober, eyes searching the house before him. Inside, Ruby waited, alerted by Marcus's decision. When Thomas entered, she cried out, a sound of pure recognition, of mother seeing son. Marcus stood back, watching their reunion. The apologies, the tears, his own feelings too complicated to name. Later, Thomas approached him cautiously. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I just want a chance to try to earn it." Marcus stared at his father, the man who left, the man who came back. "Grandma taught me something," he said finally, "about second chances." 1 month later, Ruby's surgery succeeded. Thomas moved into a small house nearby, proving himself day by day. Zoe thrived in her new school. And Marcus? He learned that kindness wasn't weakness, that sometimes one small act could change everything. "What are you thinking?" Parker asked him one evening. Marcus smiled, watching his healing family through the window. "That sometimes life does come full circle," he answered. "And sometimes the circle is better than you imagined." Parker nodded, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Your grandmother taught me that. Now you've taught me again." Marcus looked up at the man who'd changed their lives. "What happens next?" "Whatever we make happen," Parker replied, "together." Don't forget to like this video if you believe in second chances. Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness came back to you when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below and subscribe for more life-changing stories.